A little bit ago. Like maybe a couple. Like, Heather, wait a couple minutes? If we can, yeah. Okay. No, what's that? There is an attendance sheet going around. Make sure that you sign it. That's what they do. Oh, really? Okay, great. We're gonna give people just a couple minutes to trickle in. And trickle on. So nice to see you. Yes, it'll go around. Thank you for staying. You're online, please remember to name yourself with your first and last name. You're able to be on camera, great.
Yeah.
You're able to participate in the chat, great.
Seeing that now. I was looking at
If
the.
not, I understand as well.
This is much easier.
Nine, not telling me. And not telling
More people. Okay.
105 will be starting, 2 more minutes.
All right, hello. All right, wait. Tell me something here, girl.
Which Patty you got?
Yeah.
She might not, clear, that's amazing, but you might not know how to do the last name.
Chris, thanks for coming.
Pardon me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Everybody's just starting with the in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Should we start while you're going to love? Yes. Welcome, everybody. I'm Vicki Alton-Schaefer, and this is Darla Plummet, and we are going to be presenting to you today. Our topic is all about the history of working law. So hopefully it will be interesting. We want to start out in a little bit more interactive way. So I'm going to let Darla do this one.
Yeah, so thanks first of all, everyone, for coming today. So as Tippy was saying, we want to start with something a bit more interactive. So I want you all to think for the next couple of minutes and work with the person seated next to you as to what the Jewish community would need to have in a community that they're newly establishing. So think about that, like what would a community need to have? What would they want to have? So think about that for the next couple of minutes, and then I'm gonna ask the pairs to share what your ideas were as to what the community would need, when they're setting up shop in a new place.
Brand new community with nothing.
With nothing, they're starting from nothing, so go ahead.
We're just getting started.
Yeah.
Yeah, about what community is being. Wanted to pick up GIC somewhere else.
What would a brand new Jewish community need? And I feel like
Right. Pretty programming, like to things to happen.
Programming for like young children, young kids, older, like all the.
Yeah, teenagers.
If you're online, you can put something in the chat if you'd like. Right, right. Dolly Rush.
I think that's probably next.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, I don't want to interrupt these great conversations that I'm sure you're all having, but just want to pull us back here together. Does anyone want to share with the group some ideas that they came up with?
We will.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we said first to do foundation, like gotta have the Torah. And then after that, some representations that people know in that community that there's all sorts of big believers of like different ethnicities and that kind of stuff.
And different cultures,
Yes,
so everybody fit in, don't feel no left out.
yes.
Great. Great. Anybody else?
We can go.
Yeah, please.
We had a really, really long list,
Go ahead.
in no order of importance. A building, money, Jewish educators, members, a rabbi, a cantor, a temple, a Hebrew school, a preschool, programming for all ages, candles, Shabbat deli, food, bakery, love, and care.
Love it.
Wow.
That's our list.
Yeah.
That was a very comprehensive list. That's great. I really liked how you thought holistically, as to what everyone would need, not just for their spiritual needs, but also their human needs, things like food and, so that was really great. Anybody else? Yeah, please.
Kind of what we were thinking too, like, or even starting at JCC. You know, like anybody who was not open, but there was a bakery or, grocery store, daycare, school. And getting the community involved and together.
Great, great. Love that idea of, bringing everyone together. Does anyone on Zoom want to share or put anything in the chat? Thank you, Nicole.
Doing baseball.
Okay, good. Any other last comments on this part? No? Okay, those are all really great. I'm gonna turn it over to Cindy.
All right,
Right.
so.
If you're trying to change the.
I can't type about it.
You do that.
All right, so there are two Jewish texts I wanted to take to start out with, and then we'll get into the history of Jewish Milwaukee, and hopefully it will become clear why. The Shulchan Aruch, which is the code of Jewish law, talks about tzedakah. It talks about giving, charity, and where priority should be given. Okay, somebody like to read this for us? I can, go for it.
In tzedakah, any relative should be given preference to a stranger. The poor of his own house to the poor of the city at large. The poor of his own city to the poor of other cities. The poor that dwell in the Holy Land to those that dwell in other lands.
So the idea is kind of concentric circles. So if there's a need, the first place you start is at home, right? If your children are starving, you start by feeding them before you're gonna send money to people in another country, right? If your family's taken care of, but your next door neighbor is starving, you're gonna feed them again before you send it to another state, another country. So it's kind of these concentric circles. You take care of your closest network first and then spread out. Doesn't mean you shouldn't take care of others as well, but probably not a good idea to be, feeding the people in, I don't wanna say a country, because I don't want to sound
Just
disrespectful.
outside of your.
In another country when your own children are starving. All right, so the second one I want to look at, it's like not in there. I'll tell you what, now I'm gonna hand this out. The second, the quote that I'm gonna share with you is at the top here. It's from Sanhedrin, it's from the Talmud. And the Talmud asks the same question that we just asked you. It's basically, the question was, if you're starting up a brand new community, a brand new Jewish community somewhere, what does it mean? And the way it frames it, and we'll read it in a minute, is basically a Torah scholar, right? So a righteous, really righteous, learned person can't live in a community unless it has these certain things. If you don't have these things, shouldn't be there. Okay, so in other words, they're the first things you want to set up. So does anybody want to read it for us? And I want you to think about how many of the things on this list of 10 are things that got mentioned. I promise I'm gonna be talking like a lot of time. Okay.
Okay, yeah. Just the 1 through 10?
Yep.
Okay, a court that has the authority to punish transgressors. A charity fund for which monies are collected by 2 people and distributed by 3 as required by Jewish law. A synagogue, a bathhouse. What do you say that? A mikvah, a public bathroom, a doctor, a blood letter. That is, a scribe to write sacred scrolls and necessary documents, a kosher butcher, and teacher of young children. What is a blood letter?
So there was a time, and this is not a Jewish thing per se, just in general, where they used to try and treat certain illnesses by like bleeding. They would like, you ever know that? They'd like.
Yeah, they like-
some blood, so they thought it would make people healthier. Clearly not a good thing to do, not something we do anymore, but at the time. So I would say that would go along with the doctor, right? Maybe think of it as a doctor and nurse, like people to help. Obviously, a public bathroom, we kind of take that for granted now that there's gonna be a bathroom anywhere that we go. But the rest of the things on this list are the things pretty much that, some of them we got, right? The court, I know. The court, I think we take for granted now that we have a general court, we don't need a Jewish court. And we're gonna talk more about Jewish versus non-Jewish. The charity fund is very interesting. What was interesting about the way it's built? A charity fund in which monies are collected by 2 people and distributed by 3. Why would that be important?
It's fair.
That it's gonna be fair, right? That you've got somebody keeping an eye on it. First of all, you don't want the money to be collected only by one person. You want somebody keeping an eye on it to make sure that everything stays honest. But also to decide how you're gonna distribute that money, you want at least 3 people. First of all, you need to be able to break a tie, but you have to have, more voices in figuring that part out. So let's think about it this way. Do we have most of these things in Milwaukee as a Jewish community? Not a blood letter, but I think there's another.
But, something that is morphed into.
The only one I don't know that we have in Milwaukee per se is a scribe to write, sacred scrolls. I don't know that we have one in Milwaukee. There certainly are in Chicago. But I'm not sure that we have them locally. So that would be like to write a Torah scroll or a mezuzah or a, right, here we go. Or telling. Okay, so I wanted to frame this with this quote, because as we're talking about the history of Jewish Milwaukee and how it got started, I think that we're going to see a lot of these things develop, right? That in order to have a functional community, you need these things. And I think the premise with a lot of this, and first of all, the first Jew in Milwaukee, which you should see in the handout I gave you, Ezekiel Solomon, came in 1770. So there was no organized city yet to begin with, right? Milwaukee wasn't incorporated, there wasn't an organized city. So the Jewish community, through most of our history, has tried to take care of our own needs internally, right? We often lived in our own small communities. We couldn't necessarily assume that the place that we were going to be living, and we moved to lots of different places in the world, we were exiled from many, many countries. We couldn't assume that the place we were gonna live was going to take care of all our needs. So whether it was a court of law to make decisions in civil or criminal cases, or it was charities being collected, or it was somebody to teach our children, we couldn't assume that somebody else was going to be taking care of that, and so the Jewish community was taking care of it for ourselves. And sometimes it was just because there was nobody else around to do it, and sometimes it was because we lived in places where we wouldn't have been allowed to participate in whatever. So we'll kind of see that as we go around, so I wanted to kind of frame it in that way. Does that make sense? Are there any questions or comments about that? All right, so I am not going to read you every single page of this because it would get really boring and would be too much, but I will. You're gonna read it. I just thought it'd be interesting to have here and we'll kind of jump. So you see that 1770 is the first known Jew in southeastern Wisconsin. He was a fur trader, that's how he came in. But between 1842 and 1849, we see the first Jewish child born in Milwaukee, which really means like the community is developing, Emma Herbst. And the first Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur services, okay? Are they happening in a synagogue? No, one's happening in somebody's house, one is happening above a grocery store. Most synagogues do not start out with a synagogue. Most synagogues start out in somebody's living room or a community center, or not even like a big thing like this, like a small center, a room that they rent, etc. And as they get bigger, they end up having a room. So that's how it just gets started. So, next slide. A lot of more storefronts. So the very oldest congregation in Milwaukee is what eventually became, on the right, you'll see Congregation Emmanuel B'nai Ashurim, which is now in River Hills. But it started out as two different synagogues. One was Immanuel, which was organized in 1850, and Congregation B'nai Ashurim, which was organized in 1856. There's gonna be a slide I'm gonna show you at the very end when we're done. That's from the Jewish Museum. You gotta come down and look at it because it's very hard to see from the picture. But it shows all the synagogues in Milwaukee that have started apart, merged together, then split off into other different ones and like changed and it's really interesting. It's true of a lot of our synagogues. But to think that the very oldest synagogue, the first synagogue that started still has a,
History.
grandchild, great grandchild, whatever connection to a congregation that is still around today is like pretty amazing. So I wanted to show that to you. But I want to say, before the first synagogue was founded, what did they do? They purchased a cemetery. Right? And I think that that's true probably in most communities in general. I don't know that even just Jewish communities. When you start up a town, unfortunately, you need a cemetery, right? It's something that you need. And there are many very old Jewish cemeteries in Milwaukee. A few years ago, I'm pretty sure the Jewish Museum did a Jewish cemetery tour where they're taking you around. You can see like famous Jewish people in cemeteries. Old cemeteries are really fascinating. So you see a cemetery, you see by 1850, we got 200 Jewish families in Milwaukee by the end of the 1850s. And then you see social services start to develop because as you've got the Jewish community, you've got to have people taking care of each other. You have to have the beginning of that. So it started out with this True Sisters benevolent organization, right? Women didn't usually have jobs outside of the home at that point, but they were volunteering and doing and taking care of each other. So they're both women's benevolent societies that were starting. And you have the beginning of recreation, right? The precursor, if you want to think about even of the JCC, right? So you have the Odd Fellows are meeting, right? The first lodge that was set up for people to. Oh, do you need this? Okay. In the 1860s, you have Emmanuel, they changed their name now, which comes in 1869. And a lot more social services. Okay, so you see here, first you see the Hebra Bikur Kolim. Bikur Kolim means visiting the sick. So already you've got, before you've got a Jewish hospital or even maybe doctors in town, you have women who are gathering together to visit the sick. If somebody's sick, we're gonna go bring them a pot of soup, we're gonna go see what they need, do they need help taking care of their children? They're gonna be going and visiting each other. The Ladies Gemilat Chesed Society means a loving kindness organization. They're gonna find out what their neighbors need and to deal with them. Then you hear the widows, Hebrew Widows and Orphans Association, right? This is before there were any public orphanages. The Torah tells us, I think at least 36 times it's written in the Torah to take care of the widow and the orphan. It's a very, very important thing. So right away, the Jewish community is like, gotta take care of the sick, gotta take care of the poor, gotta take care of the widows and the orphans. And they start with all these different, and then a relief society for local immigrants. We gotta make sure that new Jews who are coming into the community, who don't know the language, who don't have any money, or just starting out, we're taking care of. So I have this picture up here. The Hebrew Relief Society is what eventually becomes Jewish Family Services. Right, so Jewish Family Services, which is still around, goes back to the 1860s. And you can see the big fancy societies, those were run by the men. Right, you had the men who were the leaders of it, but who were the volunteers and going out and doing actually all the volunteering was the women. By 1870, we're up to 2,000 Jews in Milwaukee. We have another synagogue, Anshe Emetz, that starts in 1874. And here's the first time we start hearing about Jewish schools. So you start hearing about the first Sunday school and the Hebrew schools for kids going to public school. So public schools are starting to establish in the area. And the kids are going to public schools and learning to be Americans and learning to speak English. But the families realize, wait, we don't want them to lose Hebrew. We don't want them to lose youth learning Jewish things. So the first Jewish school gets started. We got a sewing society that gets started, and this is the beginning of B'nai B'rith. So how many of you have heard of BBYO? So BBYO originally was B'nai B'rith Youth Organization. It is no longer a part of B'nai B'rith. They like separated out a long time ago, but that goes all the way back to the 18th. Again, finding ways for the Jewish community to be taking care of each other.
I have a question, Zippy.
Yeah.
So that's what BBYO meant a long time ago. What does it mean now?
It doesn't mean anything.
Oh, now it just
They
doesn't mean
they
anything.
became their own organization and kept the letters BBYO because
I
everybody
think it was
knew
familiar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Separate. But again, like with the synagogues, there are so many organizations that come together and then they split and then they reorganize and then they rename. So the Coalition for Jewish Learning, of course, Coalition of Jewish Learning was the Milwaukee Association for Jewish Education. Before it was that, it was the Bureau of Jewish Education. And it's all been the same organization, but the needs just keep changing. Go to the next slide. So we get, by the 1880s, we get another cemetery. Greenwood Cemetery was established. I did there. It's still a working cemetery in Milwaukee. We have a whole bunch more synagogues that have started, but one of them was called Congregation Anshe Sfard, which is over on the left. It didn't start on the west side in the 1880s. I'm sure it was in the city, but eventually moved to the west side where Sherman Park area is, but this is not the one from the 1880s. But now today, you have Anshe Sfard Kehilat Torah, ASKT, which is a combination of Anshe Kehilat Torah. So again, you can see the connections between all of these. In the late 1880s, we started having a lot of immigration from Eastern Europe. The first Jews that settled, by the way, in Milwaukee were German Jews. Not surprising, because Milwaukee was settled by Germans, right? So German Jews were coming someplace where they found people who could speak the language, and there were things that were familiar to them. In the 1880s, things got very bad in Eastern Europe and in Russia for the Jewish community. There were a lot of pogroms, which are basically the Russian peasants were coming into a town and attacking and killing and raping and doing bad things. There were a lot of people who were killed. And so a lot of Jews from Eastern Europe left and came to the United States during that time. That's when my ancestors came. So a lot of people came over at that time. And so suddenly you have these German Jews who have been here for a while and are speaking English and are making money and have these good lives. And now all of a sudden you've got these very poor Jews coming from Eastern Europe with nothing, who don't speak the language. And it was this push-pull. Because on the one hand, the Jews who were here said, oh, we gotta take care of them, they're our brothers and sisters, we've gotta help them out. But they also like, oh, we don't wanna be associated with them, because they're greenhorns. You guys know that expression? A greenhorn is somebody who's like new and from outside, and they're strange, and everybody's gonna think we're like that. So there was this like push pull, oh, we're gonna help you, because you're one of our people, but we also like, we're gonna have our synagogue here, we're gonna be the German speaking, Reform movement, and you're gonna have your own Eastern European synagogue. We were talking about this earlier today, about churches too. The churches in Milwaukee used to be, right?
Yeah, so I grew up with a Catholic upbringing, so when Tiffany and I were talking about her presentation, we were talking about how much overlap there really was between the Jewish community and Catholic community. So specifically for parishes during this time in Milwaukee and throughout the country, they were organized by ethnic background, so there'd be a church for people of Polish ancestry and Italian and Irish. So people in those days just kind of congregated with people of similar upbringing and culture.
And a lot of it also speaks language, so they could understand themselves.
Right.
There was a question over here? No? Great. Feel free to jump in with questions or comments. You may have more knowledge about some of these things than I do. And then you start seeing more of these lodges and these clubs, again, because the Jewish community was not being welcomed into clubs that were being run by the non-Jewish, people who were living in Milwaukee. And then you see our first Yiddish newspaper begin. Okay, Yiddish is a combination of medieval German and written in Hebrew letters, and it's got some also Slavic languages thrown in. It was the common spoken language of Jews that come from Eastern Europe and from Germany as well. So they had a newspaper, a Jewish newspaper that was being published in Yiddish. So that was started. By 1890, you have second home cemetery being established. I will tell you, that's where my mom, my grandparents, my great grandparents are all buried in the same plot at second home, still operating synagogue. And then you have the first kind of formally organized Hever Kadisha burial system. Jews have very specific process for preparing a body to be buried. And by tradition, from the moment somebody dies until they're buried, the body should not be left alone as a sign of respect. So when somebody dies, to this day, this is a volunteer something that people do from the community. They'll come and they'll sit with the body, they'll wash the body and prepare it for burial. And somebody will be with the body until the person dies. It is considered, they call it chesed shel emet, a kindness of truth, because it's the one kindness in the world that can never be repaid. Right? If I do something nice for you, someday in the future, you might do something nice for me, or if nothing else, you might say thank you, which might make me feel good, right? When you do something for somebody who's dead, that's it. There's no thank you, there's no appreciation, there's no reciprocity, you only are doing it out of kindness. So it's a great responsibility, but a very important role. There's still a Hever Kadisha in Milwaukee in the Jewish community. There's one, men take care of male bodies, women take care of women's bodies, because they undress them to prepare them for burial. So that had started already in the 1890s. Question, comment?
No, I said, how'd you like to have that?
I will tell you, I've done it, and it's hard. It's really hard, but I will also tell you that having lost my mom and lost other people, knowing that somebody is caring for your loved one at that moment is very meaningful, and to know that they are going to take care of the person that you care about. It is. All right, so we're on the top of page 3. So we're still in the 1890s. We have the beginning of the first Jewish settlement house. Okay, Jewish settlement house is the precursor of the JCC. Have any of you guys ever heard of the settlement cookbook?
Yeah.
Okay, Lizzie Kander.
Yes.
Lizzie Kander, wealthy Jewish woman living in Milwaukee, sets up this settlement. She says the people coming to town, newcomers, they don't know English. They don't necessarily have a place to shower. They don't know how to cook American food. They don't know all sorts of things, and she starts setting up classes. They build this first house, the settlement house. They sell cookbooks with Jewish American recipes. My mom used a settlement cookbook. I still have one at home. And the proceeds from that are funding this house that they have a couple of different houses that are relating to the JCC. People come take classes in English, in sewing, they get vocational training. It's a social thing. This is where the JCC is. You gonna say something? How do you look like yours?
Oh, I think, yes, Julie Lukacs has really, I think, investigated her or studied her, and it's just really cool to think that one person could have such a huge impact and have all those experiences for people.
And the cookbook was known all over the country. It was very well known. And if you go to the Jewish Museum, they have a whole section about the settlement cookbook and in Canada. You also have the very first Hebrew Free Loan Association, which we still have in Milwaukee today. So what is the interesting thing here? So interesting on several levels. In the Torah, it talks about charging interest, right? And it's a whole big thing for Christians too, right? Because there was a whole thing with the Catholic Church was not allowing people to charge interest, right? You have to give out loans. And it's why in, medieval Europe, it's why Jews became money lenders. Because the Catholics needed to be able to borrow money, but they couldn't borrow from each other. So the Jews ended up being the money lenders and allowing commerce to take place. It was also because Jews weren't allowed to own land, so it gave them something to do. But the Bible also says that the Jews are not supposed to charge interest to other Jews. They can charge interest to non-Jews, but not to Jews. And so the idea of setting a free loan association within the Jewish community gets started, right? So like I said, it still exists in Milwaukee today. So if there's somebody in the Jewish community who needs a small loan, they can go to the Jewish Free Loan Association, they can get out a small loan and they can pay it back in time without any interest being charged. And it's amazing. It's an amazing organization because all of the loans end up being paid back and then the money just gets recycled and it gets loaned out again. People use it for
You don't have to be
Right,
Jewish.
you don't have to be Jewish to use the Jewish Free Loan Association.
Yeah.
It's non-sectarian, which I think is very cool.
Kind of cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That is true. It started out as a Jewish thing and then.
yeah, but that's just cool to see,
No, it's
like,
really
this
important.
information,
Right,
it's
it's
the
not
growth, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. All right, you also have the Children's Outing Society that gets funded because life is not easy in Milwaukee when it's getting founded, right? Everybody's living crowded together in tenements. It's not so clean, there's not so much fresh air. And so this outing association was the beginning of summer camps. And they would just take the kids during the summer, out of downtown Milwaukee, like Clutch Park, that would be going far away from the city, right? But to get some fresh air and get the kids out and running around and playing, etc. And you had your first Jewish home for the aged, right? So the place for senior living. Now, I'm guessing that the age that they were moving into a nursing home or a home for the aged was much younger than today. Just because of lifespan. Right, let's look at the next slide. So the 1900s, by the way, this is when Golda Meir moves to Milwaukee from Russia. So she eventually becomes Prime Minister of Israel. She's living here. And we have the beginning of a bunch of congregations that you hear today. So you see the beginning of now it's Beth Israel Ner Tamid, but Beth Israel is founded. And Agudas Achim is founded, which is what becomes Chabad in Mequon. Anshe Leibowitz, which also ends up in Mequon, gets founded. The beginning of Congregation Sinai, although it kind of opened and then closed and then opened again. These are all getting started in the early 1900s.
The building on the left is the old Beth Israel.
That is what was Beit HaMidrash HaGadol, and then that eventually becomes.
Is the building still around?
I think so. I think so, but it's not Beth Israel.
Yeah.
Right, and then the one on the right is what becomes Beth Israel, but that's not the current.
Now what? I'm sorry.
I don't think, that's not the current building right now.
Oh,
So this will join with,
Beth, with
congregation, no.
Beth El Ner Tamid.
Yeah.
And Beth El Ner Tamid was a combination of Beth El and another, that's what I'm telling you, this.
Come to the museum.
Come to the museum. and see
It's like
it.
intricate
It's really
weaving
interesting.
of how everything merged and.
And you also have the beginning of the first Jewish hospital. So it starts out as a Jewish Hospital Association, which eventually becomes in 1913 Mount Sinai. So why did we need a Jewish hospital?
Jews weren't treated.
Jews weren't allowed to be treated in the non-Jewish hospital and Jewish doctors weren't allowed to work in the non-Jewish hospital. So I will tell you that my dad, who's retired now, but he spent his whole career working at Mount Sinai Hospital, which eventually becomes Sinai Samaritan Hospital. But when I was a kid, it was Mount Sinai, that's where I was born. You know, and I think by the time he started his practice in the sixties, it's not that he wouldn't have been allowed to work at another hospital, but he certainly was going to have a lot more patients and be a lot more welcomed in working there, than he would have been.
I feel like it's so true too, like I feel like a lot of Jewish doctors don't work at like Columbia St. Mary's.
That's true. I don't know, that's true. I mean, and certainly like St. Joe's, which is in the Sherman Park
That's where I
area,
was born.
is very much used by the Jewish
And
community.
yeah, I was gonna say my mom's OB/GYN when I was born
Yeah.
30+ years ago, actually was Jewish.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, I don't know that,
that.
I think that there probably are,
Starter.
there may be Jewish people who are more comfortable going to a Jewish doctor. Sure.
Yeah.
I certainly think that that might be true.
Well, because there's like quotes, like New Testament quotes.
Yeah, my youngest and my middle one were both born in Catholic hospitals. I had 3 kids born in 3 different hospitals in 3 different states. But we went in to have my second one in the Catholic hospital. My husband took a washcloth and covered the cross on the front. I was in labor, he didn't want me. And the Council of Jewish Women was founded as a social group. You guys maybe have heard of NCJW, the National Council of Jewish Women, that's the route. Okay, we can go to the next one. So we're up to like 1910. You start seeing, so this is, I thought you would like this, okay? So on the left is the Abraham Lincoln House, which was after the Settlement House before the JCC. The one in the middle is the JCC I remember from my childhood, right next to the Federation Building. It's where High Point is right now. So that's the JCC, it was on Prospect, and obviously we're sitting in the third building. What? Bar mitzvah there?
My parents were married there.
Yeah, I have lots and lots of memories there. Telling Carla yesterday, I used to go there, they used to have a bus every Saturday. They would have a program called the Saturday program. And then you get on a bus and the same kids I went to day camp with, we'd go down to the JCC, we'd swim and play in the gym on the trampoline and do art projects and sing Israeli songs. I remember having grape juice for Kiddush, for years I went, it was a very big part of my childhood.
Yeah, didn't they have a restaurant in there?
They did have a restaurant.
Restaurant.
Yeah, they had a restaurant, they had a swimming pool, it was the place to be. They got rid of what? The whole building is gone. They tore down the building and built High Point. High Point is literally in the same place as that is right now.
They kept like part of it, I think, like
The Federation building is still
Yeah.
there, right, so the Federation, it was like, they were built at the same time, the
Yeah.
Federation building and the
like
JCC.
the chapel is still there or something like that.
Was that original, from the original?
I think so, yeah, like something along those lines, like part of the building.
Yeah, so it's just, yeah, I have lots of memories of that. You see the first Milwaukee Talmud Torah, so there was like one Hebrew school program that starts for the whole city. But there was also, and I've heard about this, like from people my grandparents' age, I remember hearing about it, the New Method Hebrew School. So in 1910, so just need to think what the new method was of teaching in Hebrew in 1910. Love to know that. You've got the Society for the Care of Dependent Children, you've got the Hebrew Relief Association, the Free Clinic. Like this is the Abraham Lincoln House that's up there. And now you're starting to have Jewish unions, right? Amalgamated clothing. So you start seeing that happen. The Jewish National Workers Alliance. There were a lot of Jewish socialists at that time. It was very common.
I think that would be very common in Milwaukee as a
In Milwaukee
whole,
in
though.
general.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You get another weekly Yiddish newspaper, you know, and a sports club, this Jim Noel Dalit club. By 1920, the Jewish population of Milwaukee is 22,000. Can we go to the next one? I want you to know we're doing a community study right now,
Yes.
so we will know soon, but I'm guessing that's pretty close to what our population is now.
Yeah, no, I think that's gonna be pretty spot on. So stay tuned until the fall when we share all the data with you.
So that's interesting. This is when Congregation Beth Yehuda is founded. The building on the left is the original one. One on the right is where they are now. They were in Sherman Park the whole time. And This is when Emmanuel and B'nai Jeshurun combined and they moved to Kenwood. So if you guys know the Zelato Center at UWM on Kenwood, that was UWM. That was UWM, that's right. That was Emmanuel B'nai Jeshurun before they sold it to UWM and moved to River Hills. So when I was growing up, that's where. So that's in the 1920s. And like I said, Rabbi Jacob Twersky, who is the current Rabbi Twersky's grandfather, establishes Beth Yehuda on the west side, which is that community is still there and thriving.
What does Yehuda mean?
Anybody want to
That's
guess?
a name.
Yeah,
Well,
means Jew. Judah means Jew. Jew, the Hebrew. Yehuda is Yehudim, right? Yehuda is a Hebrew word for Jew. But the root of the word, the very interesting thing about the word Jewish, the root of the word is todah, which means thankful. The whole essence of what it means to be Jewish is to be grateful. It's gratitude. It's kind of cool. All right, go to the next one. So the precursor of Rainbow Day Camp, when I was a kid, it was the JCC Day Camp, but it was in Fredonia. But before that was Camp Sidney Cone. So this is in the 1940s. I know that my mom, pretty sure my mom, I remember she was there as a camper, she was a counselor there. And anybody who's gonna be coming on Sunday to the Salute to Jewish Educators, where we're honoring Merzy Eisenberg, Merzy and my mom were at Camp Sidney Cone together.
I went to Camp Sidney Cone too.
So what can you tell us about it? Tell us something about it.
Oh, I think I was probably 9 years old. And either paid the due for whatever the camp was, or you went through a red feather agency. And then your cost was paid for. And it was probably run very much like camps are today. We slept in cabins, the older kids in tents. We went on some field trips. We sat in the cafeteria and said our prayers and what we were grateful for, like being around a Thanksgiving table. And I can't remember if our parents were allowed to come and see us or not.
Where was it?
Where was it? I want to say Fredonia, but I'm not sure.
I don't think it was on the same campus as where Rainbow is, but yeah,
That looks just like Rainbow now.
it does.
Was it pluralistic?
Yeah, I think it was cute. I thought you would get a kid.
But I wasn't,
Boy, it would be a great done.
All right, next slide. So Mount Sinai Hospital, which we were talking about before, is established. That's the original Mount Sinai on the left. That's the current Sinai Medical Center. I will tell you that every job I've had in my entire life has been in Jewish education, except for one summer when I worked for my dad, who worked at Sinai, when I worked in his office and was. So I can remember Sinai a long time.
when did the new Sinai? When was that established? You know,
That's an interesting question. When it moved into that building?
right,
We'll have to look it up. We don't seem to have it.
but I wonder.
Oh, here, no, yeah, no. Yeah, I'm not sure. In the 1920s, we also have the beginning of the Women's Welfare Board, which eventually becomes a part of Federation, but this is the origin of women's philanthropy, right, today, right? The idea of women raising their own money and helping with the causes that need to be started. And the first Hadassah chapter in Milwaukee was started, which many women are still involved with Hadassah. The next one. We also have the beginning of Jewish National Fund, okay? Jewish National Fund. Why is that surprising that that was founded in the 1920s? It was before Israel became state, okay? So the work of Jewish National Fund, which we think of as planting trees and helping settle the land of Israel, It was around before Israel became a state, right? And that's the money, you guys seen those blue boxes, people had those blue boxes and they were raising money, people went around to collect pennies. To plant trees in Israel, to buy land in Israel, and that's the land that was settled as Israel became a state. Greenwood Country Club is established, okay? Why do we need a Jewish country club? Because Jews were not allowed, right? They were not, there were, you know, laws, no blacks, no Jews, no dogs, is the signs they would have in the outside of country clubs. And so they could not join, they could not join other country clubs. My middle son, a few years back, worked at a tennis club in Fox Point that I won't mention the name of. That until probably 15 years ago, I don't think ever had Jewish members. And I don't think they knew he was Jewish when they hired him. And it was a really interesting experience for him working there, because there were like, even in the middle of Fox Point, there were not Jewish people. And now Manchester Ale to begins the Anti-Defamation League. You guys heard of the EDL? Okay, fighting anti-Semitism, that's beginning. Right, we'll go on to the next one. As we go into the 1930s, this is the official beginning of the Milwaukee Jewish Federation, right? So it was the Jewish Welfare Fund and eventually becomes called Federation. Again, you can see on the left, there's a bunch of men. Right, and now if you look on the wall down in the boardroom at Federation, you see men as presidents, and then you see lots and lots of women taking over leadership. What? Thank you. Jewish war veterans started around this time, right? Because we're now past World War I, before World War II. All right, let's keep going. So the 1940s, you have the Jewish Convalescence Center is opened on 51st Street. That's what eventually leads to Ovation, the Jewish home at Time Point, taking care of our seniors. Let's keep going. The 1950s, you have the beginning of Congregation Shalom. I couldn't find an old picture of Shalom when I was growing up. They've always been in that building, although the sanctuary is new. That's Rabbi Harry Pastor, who was my rabbi when I was a little girl. I loved him very much. Anyway, so that was Congregation, was founded in the 50s, but Avjay Leibowitz and the Buddhist Achim and Sinai, they're all getting started in the 50s. The Wisconsin Society for Jewish Learning gets started, devoted to Jewish education, adults and children at that time. The JCC builds their building on Prospect Avenue. We saw the picture before. Beginning of women's division of the Jewish Community Center and the foundation for the State of Israel bonds, as we're building the State of Israel. All right. In the 1960s, we have the very first day school in Milwaukee. At the time, it was called Hillel Academy, eventually became Bader Hillel Academy. Originally, it was in this building on the left, which is on Fort Washington near Hampton. Yeah. Remember that building? So that's where Hillel Academy was at the beginning. Now they're obviously in the full building, the other part of this campus. In the 60s, you also have Camp Interlochen established in Eagle River, JCC Day Camp, which became Rainbow Day Camp in Fredonia, and Jewish chaplaincy services get started. The chaplains going into the hospitals to take care of people. In the 70s, you've got Temple Menorah moving to 76th Street. You've got the first Chabad house in Wisconsin. Okay, the Rebbe in New York starts sending emissaries all over the country to start Chabad centers for college campuses, and the one is started here near UWM in Akron, with Yisrael and Dvorah Schmackman, who are still here. You have Hillel being established at UWM in Milwaukee to also serve Jewish students. Bureau of Board of Jewish Education, which becomes CJL, gets started. And this is when the Jewish Welfare Fund changes its name to Federation. And at the beginning of the Jewish Community Foundation, where so much money is saved. And this is when the healthcare building, where Federation is now, is built. And that becomes the home of the Federation, the Jewish Community Foundation, Jewish Vocational Services, which does not exist anymore. It's now the Center for Independence.
Yeah, that's not
Jewish Job Training, Jewish Family Services, Milwaukee Jewish Council, which is now today's Jewish Community Relations Council, the Chronicle started, and BBYO, they were all downtown there. Now the next one, in the eighties, we have sorry, I'm gonna show you that, there's Interlochen. Okay, good on. So in the eighties, you've got Milwaukee Jewish Day School being established, the first Holocaust Memorial in Milwaukee, which is downtown near the Federation. And in the eighties, this campus was purchased, right? So this campus, this used to be, do you know, this used to be University School? That's what this whole campus used to be, with University School. Gets purchased and it becomes the home of the JCC and MJDS and MAGE, which is precursor of CGL, EBYO, Lubavitch Nursery, which is now Jewish Beginnings. And I don't know if you know this, Jewish Family Services also used to have a preschool in the same building, that was shared space. So that's all going on. In terms of social services, we start Golden My Year House, which is for seniors. Jewish Community Pantry gets started, Wisconsin Jewish Conference, which does lobbying for Jewish causes. And interestingly, the Generation After Club. Generation After Club is for children of Holocaust survivors. Who create their own social network because their experience is very, very different than other people. 1990s, Jewish population is 21,000, really not so much different than it was. You've got ASKT being formed, Chabad and Mequon, Ora Torah, which is in Glendale, Torah Academy in Milwaukee, which is a high school, JL becomes JL, Holocaust Education Resource Center, started as a program in CJL, by the way. And I thought this was kind of interesting. By 1992, you've got 2,541 kids studying in Jewish schools. Some day schools, some in religious schools, some in preschools. By 2002, you're down to 2,246 kids in Jewish schools. From 1992, I have all this, the census population stuff. Yeah, I talked a lot. By 2011, our population was up to 30,000, but I'm not sure that number was so good, but we'll see. We'll get our new numbers soon. One more. Yeshiva Elementary School, sorry, left that one out. And what's that one? So this is the thing you have to come see at the museum. It shows all these lines are each the different synagogues that merge and split and whatever. So you really should come down and see that. It's hard to take a picture of it because of the way.
And it's just very large, so you have to see it in
You
person.
have to come see. All right, I left a little time. First of all, questions, but also if there are comments and if there are things about Jewish history in Milwaukee that you think are important that I didn't include, I certainly would be happy to hear. And if you think back to what we started with at the very beginning, of the things that you needed in a Jewish community, the court and the doctor and the scribe and the butcher, like, do you see a lot of these things playing out in the community here? Give you any insight into Milwaukee's Jewish community or understanding?
Yes. They seem good.
I have a question. Is the kosher meat club still around?
It is not, but it was there for a long time, but there's a new kosher place not far from there called Quick Kosher. And they even delivered it, which is very nice. What?
Well, this what is your food, kosher food?
Kosher, there's a kosher grocery store called Quick Kosher.
I would assume no agree.
I would agree with you. Ani.
Yeah.
That was very good.
So it's gluten, jelly.
Ellie. There are a lot more things we could have added here. We could put a whole thing about Jewish food and all the different places. There are many of them. It's interesting, a lot of the buildings that used to be synagogues, some of them still exist. A lot of them are now churches. So there are some old synagogue buildings that are now churches. You can drive by and you see Hebrew still on the outside of the building, which is very interesting. You know, for people who have long roots in Milwaukee, and all of you probably know that there are a lot of people who've been in Milwaukee for a long time. And it's interesting to think about all these different places that existed. And the stories that you tell going from one generation to another. The synagogue I go to is what used to be Candles on
Yeah.
what? Right, right. So like thinking about the times I used to go there with my grandparents when I was a kid, it's in a restaurant and now it's my synagogue. Like, you know, the Milwaukee is just, it's just like that. And it's fun to see these connections and these stories. But I hope it helps you understand the deep roots of a lot of the institutions that are in Milwaukee. I think it makes us think at Federation very hard about the work that we do and the importance of both preserving our connections to the past and also serving the needs of the current population and into the future. It just shows how very important it is. Like, we've been here for a long time and we want to provide for the next generation and the next generation to have Jewish moments, diverse communities. I think it's really important. I also do want to say something about what Darla said earlier when she mentioned the pre-loan, because a lot of the organizations that started out in Milwaukee, taking care of the needs of the Jewish community, now are providing for lots and lots of people, not just the Jewish community. We were taking care of our own needs when there was nobody else taking care of us and when we really needed it. And again, those circles got bigger. And when our community, got to a place where we didn't have such a need for ourselves, we also wanted to provide for the needs of others. So if you think about what Jewish vocational services was, which is now for everybody, if you look at Jewish family services, the majority of the people it serves are not Jewish. You think about the Jewish food pantry, majority of people it serves are not Jewish. Jewish free loan, we talked about the JCC.
Even here, right?
For sure. So there are lots and lots of these organizations that started out just helping the Jewish community because that's where the need was. Where the desire to help the community just expanded and is now working well beyond. And that's a great thing.
Thank you. I just want to take a couple minutes for Darla to kind of describe what, this is kind of like a part one, part two.
Yeah.
So this is the organizational life, wait, no, this is the.
This was
a
series.
Yeah, so
And the next one will be on May 21st.
so I hope you all are able to come back for part two of this. So Tippy laid the foundation for the history of Jewish Milwaukee, and I'm gonna be talking about Jewish organizational life. So not only thinking about currently what we're doing in our work, but thinking about the future as well. Like what Tippy had alluded to, we wanna make sure that Jewish Milwaukee is vibrant today, but also towards tomorrow. So I hope you all can come back in May.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very lovely.
Don't forget to come on Sunday for the salute. Thank you, everyone online. 3 o'clock here.
Okay. Stop by me.
Great job, ladies. Yes. Thank you, shares forever.